Excuse me. Sorry about that cough. Hello and welcome to RevUp North Carolina's presentation for Disability Voting Rights Week with AAPD. My name is Pamela McAfee. I will be your host for this, and I am the president of the RevUp NC, RevUp North Carolina, which is Register, Educate, Vote, Use Your Power. Now, this presentation is going to have a lot of information for anyone who is planning on voting in this election in 2025. And we will go over that in the presentation. If there's any questions that you might have, want to follow up with me, the best way to reach us is at revupnc@gmail.com, revupnc@gmail.com, and you can check us out online at revupnc.org. So, as you may or may not know, September 8th through the 12th, 2025 is the National Disability Voting Rights Week. This is a good time for us to make plans on, it's 2025. A lot of places are not having elections, but here in North Carolina, there are municipal elections. There are other states that are having statewide elections, but right now we're focusing on our municipalities here in North Carolina. So let me go ahead and just start my presentation here. And there's closed captioning. Hopefully, you'll be able to watch that throughout the presentation. If you need further accessibility requirements or any feedback, because I'm still learning on how to make things accessible visually, etc. So we take any feedback on that as well. So please, the main thing about voting is to make sure you have a plan ahead of time. How are you going to make your voting plan? And this is about 2025 in North Carolina, and we have municipal elections. But first of all, let's start out with who can vote in North Carolina. I use the North Carolina Board of Elections website very much. A lot of this presentation will be using wording straight from it. Here, right here is the website for this page, and where this information even fleshed out more is the best way to reach this website is just to go to the NCSBE, which is North Carolina State Board of Elections, ncsbe.gov. That's Nancy, Charlie, Sierra, Bravo, Echo, dot Golf, Oscar, Victor. And you can find out all sorts of information. It's a very good site. And again, if you have any issues with accessibility on that site, there is an ADA coordinator that you can reach out to, and their name is on the site often. So, who can vote in North Carolina? According to the North Carolina Board of Elections website, you can register to vote in North Carolina if you fit these qualifications. You have to be a U.S. citizen at this time. You do not have to prove you're a U.S. citizen. However, it is very clear that if you are not forthcoming with that information of whether you're a U.S. citizen or not, if there's any fraud, you'll be breaking the law. So legally, you have to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote in North Carolina. You have to live in the county where you're registering and have resided there for at least 30 days prior to election day. And also, you have to be at least 18 years old or will be by the date of the general election. So on federal election years, if you are 17 during the primary, but you'll turn 18 by the general election, you can definitely vote that year. Saying that also, if you are a 16 or 17-year-old in North Carolina, you can pre-register. So those are options that you have in North Carolina. The other thing is to not be serving felony sentence, including any period of probation, post-release supervision, or parole, which is known colloquially. It's known as being on paper. So if you have served a felony sentence and you're still on paper, you cannot vote. Um, Democracy NC, which is little d democracy. Democracy NC is a very good resource for information on how to get your voting rights back if you have been if you have been convicted of a felony in the past and have and you're off paper now. So democracync.org is a good place, and I might be referencing that again as we go along. So before we go into why we registered to vote, we should ask, why do we vote? In the USA and North Carolina, even in our cities and towns, we choose the people to represent us. And those people go on to make decisions that affect our daily lives, from who runs our schools to how tax dollars are spent on the programs we need. It's very important for you to use your voice, to use your power. That's the UP of the REVUP. Register, educate, vote, but use your power. And we all, like I said, with who can register to vote, that includes a lot of us who may or may not be voting. So there's two main types of elections. We can go into greater detail, but basically what I'm looking at are state and federal elections. So in North Carolina, on even numbered years, we will vote for a U.S. congressperson and many statewide races. Every 4 years, we vote for the president of the United States. The next presidential election, we just did one in 2024, so the next presidential election will be in 2028. And then U.S. senators are voted on every 6 years. So that comes out unevenly. So this 2026, which is the next federal election and state election, will be voting on our U.S. senator here in North Carolina. So got it. That's going to be an interesting race. The one that is currently in that position is not running for reelection. So, but we're not focusing on that today. We're focusing on municipal elections. This is an odd number year, so towns and cities might have elections. It could be from mayor to city council to school board or more. It depends on the municipality whether A, they have the election, and B, what positions are up for election each year. So the municipal elections will be held on November 4th, 2025. Like I said, these local elections are very important. They have the greatest impact on our daily lives. And even though they are so important, they are very poorly attended. If you want to make changes on how your city or town does things, it's important for you to vote in these elections. Saying that, it's also important to know that not every North Carolina voter will be able to vote this year. What I mean is, you have to live in the cities or municipalities that are holding these elections. So if you don't live in these cities or municipalities, there will be no election for you this year. How do you find that out? Well, you can go to, like I said, I rely heavily on the North Carolina State Board of Election website, and a really good. Let me stop here for a second, real quick. I noticed that board member Crystal Robinson, they have entered. So Crystal, I'm going to make you a co-host if I can. Well, it looks like I can make you the host. So George, thank you for joining us. I'm explaining about municipal elections in North Carolina. Crystal, you have the keys to the entire presentation now for allowing people in or out of the meeting. I don't have any of the controls. So thank you for joining me today. Let's get back to who is having elections here in North Carolina this year. Well, again, it's municipal elections. The best way to find out is that the state website, the North Carolina State Board of Elections.gov /voting/upcoming -election. And this is a screen print of like a graphic. There's a lot of ways to get this information on this site. It is such a robust and very useful site. So if you click on that one and you go to that specific page, you'll see this graphical presentation of the map. The grade in counties are almost every single county has an election. When you click on the county, it will tell you which elections are, which municipalities will have an election that year. Now, I was talking about November 4th. Just so you know, today, which is September 9th, 2025, there are some municipalities that are having primaries. If your municipality or city has primaries, that's going to be held today. So but the general election is going to be on November 4th. Now, we have this lovely little map here. If this is a good way for you to use it, to click on it and find out who could be running, what elections could be happening, you just click on there. But if you'd like a different format, like I said, very robust, very user friendly, there's this local voter tool. And if you click on it, it brings you up like a spreadsheet. And this is just a screenshot of this. This is that local voter tool. And here I have some Avery. In Avery County, we have the grandfather village council member. That's like cool. I would love to run for that, wouldn't you? Or even the Seven Devils Council, Town Council. Such cool names in Avery County. But here are the elections, and if they are partisan and nonpartisan, if there is a primary, and there's even a date for if there's a primary runoff before the November 4th. But these are all in Avery County and all their elections. There's 2 slots open for the village council member. Seven Devils Town Council has 3 slots open. This is not going to tell you who's running. This is just going to tell you what races are up. Now, we'll go into a little bit about how you can find out who's running later on in the presentation. So, when you're making a voting plan, we know the election is coming up, so you have to know some very important dates. I'll go into absentee by mail or vote by mail a little bit more, but if you want to get your your ballots earliest, the quickest way to vote and get it done and over with is absentee by mail, vote by mail, and you can request a ballot now. And I'll show you how to do that later. But you can request a ballot now, and on October 3rd is when they're released, when they're sent out, when they're mailed out. Now, if you're going to, this is very important point I'm about to make here. If your plan is, I always vote on election day, I always vote on election day at my polling location. If that is your plan and you're set that that's the way that you want to do this, then you have to note that your voter registration has to be updated. Everything has to be correct. You have to be registered for and perfect. Like the updated, if you've moved, make sure all your voter registration is up to date by October 10th. And that's the deadline for municipal elections. However, one of the things I absolutely love about North Carolina elections is that we have a thing called one-stop early voting. And excuse me, I will go into greater detail about why I'm so excited about one-stop early voting. The early voting period starts on October 16th. Keep that in mind. I love early voting, but I'm not telling you which way to vote. I'm just telling you that that's my favorite way of doing it. If you want to do the vote by mail, you have to have requested your vote by mail ballot by October 24th at 5 p.m. So, and I'll go into more detail about how to do that. But if you want to vote by mail, election day is November 4th. So you have to have that request because they got to get it to you and it's got to get back to them. So October 21st, 2024, 5 p.m. is the very last day time that you can request your absentee ballot. Now, early voting runs from October 16th to November 1st at 3 p.m. So it's going to start on the same day statewide and end on the same day and time statewide, but how it all figures in per county, per municipality is different. And we'll go into greater details of what your early voting days and what's being offered per your county later on. Now, if you're one of the people who likes to vote on election day, the good thing is that there's not a lot of wiggle room of date or time. Just the only main thing is make sure you're registered by October 10th and make sure you show up on November 4th at your assigned polling location for your precinct from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. So that one's if you want things done a specific way, if you like that that there's only one day to show up, and during that 13-hour period, then that's the way for you to go. So let's go into a little bit more details of the types of voting. So in-person election day, like I said, you have to be registered to vote, and updated. Make sure it's updated. Make sure everything's in perfect order by October 10th, 2025. You have to vote at your voting precinct polling place. You can't go to another precinct. And that's why we have to make a plan, because you have to know where that is. And you have to show up between 6:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. Now, there's not long lines usually on municipal elections, but if there are going to be lines, it's usually at the very end when people are like, oh my goodness, I forgot I have to vote. Well, as long as you're in line by 7:30 p.m., you can vote. If you show up to vote at your polling location and there's an issue with your registration, you will always they cannot turn you away and say you cannot vote, because you were always eligible to vote provisionally. So a provisional ballot, I'll talk more about provisional ballots later, but it's provided, provisional, provided that we're going to let you vote. You don't have any proof of address, but we hope that you'll provide that to us later. So provisional ballots are like, we're going to go ahead and let you kind of vote, but we may or may not count it. And that's what a provisional ballot is. I'll go into that, like I said, in greater detail later. Vote by mail, or it's also known as absentee, and I usually say VBM, or abbreviated as VBM, or absentee voting. You have to be registered to vote. Good thing about in North Carolina is there's no special circumstance or reason. You don't have to have a reason to vote by mail in North Carolina. Some states you have to prove that you have a disability or you have some kind of barrier to showing up to vote in order to do it. Some places don't even, I think that there's like a state or two that don't even offer it. I don't know. I could be wrong with that one. I shouldn't have gone off on that tangent because I can't prove it, but I can say that in North Carolina, no special circumstance or reason is needed to vote by mail. But not all municipalities offer it. Some of your smaller municipalities, it's a time intensive for the boards of elections and costs extra money. So not all municipalities offer vote by mail. You must request a ballot. You can either request it online or through your county board. Online, there's a way that you can print out a paper, PDF request, but you can either do it online or through your county board. And your vote by mail ballot must be returned by 7:30 p.m. on election day. It's got to be at the Board of Elections by 7:30 p.m. on election day. This is super important because in the past, they gave you a few days. Oh, it can show up. It can show up like 3 days after. No. Your ballot's got to be in their hands by 7:30 p.m. on election day. So this is things that you need to take into consideration when you're making your voting plan. So here, one stop early voting, what I love. Like I said, it's going to be October 16th through November 1st at 3 p.m. 3 p.m. November 1st, early voting shuts down statewide. The beautiful thing about one stop early voting is if you're not registered or maybe you moved to a different county about 6 months ago, and now you need to register at your new location. You can do almost anything. I don't think you can do name changes, but almost anything with your registration to update it. You can update your well, a party affiliation wouldn't be a consideration on most of these elections anyhow. But there's like a list of things you can't do. But the majority, it's wide open to go ahead and register to vote or update your registration during one-stop early voting. So from the 16th of October to November 1st at 3 p.m., you can do that. Now, this is where it gets a little bit different per county. So you vote at the county early voting locations. That has been determined already, and you should be able to find that information out. There's a number of ways of finding it out. I'm so sorry for the yawn. And I will show you my favorite way of finding your county early voting location in a little bit. But you can vote at the county early voting location. So wherever they have set up throughout your county, whatever times they set up, whatever days they set up. So there's a lot of flexibility, but it counts on you knowing when and where to show up. So recently, my county, I live in Davidson County, we fought to get Sunday early voting, had it for a couple times, and this election they're not going to offer Sunday early voting. So that, like I said, that changes every election. So you have to know where to find that information. The other thing too is not all counties in the municipal elections will offer the one-stop early voting. We'll do that in person one-stop early voting. But to me, I feel it offers the most flexibility. If you find out what time you can make better plans, or you can say, oh, I didn't make it today, but I should be able to make it next, but you just have to make sure you make those plans within that time window. Again, I'm not going to tell you which one way is better than the others. I just tell you my preference is the one-stop early voting, mostly because if there's any problem whatsoever with your registration, you get it taken care of then. Because remember, we had to have our registration done prior to the 16th if we were going to vote on election day. So if there's a problem with your registration and you show up on election day, you can still vote provisionally, but remember, it may or may not be counted. If you want to make sure that your vote is counted, unless you're 100% sure that your registration's all up to date, this is the best way to make sure. And recently, there's been some issues with voter registration where they were trying to remove, saying some registration wasn't complete, and those votes were in contention. If you want your vote to be counted, you have to make sure your registration is up to date. That's why I like this one so much, because you can ensure that everything is up to date if you show up to do the one-stop early voting. Again, not going to tell you which one's the best way of doing it. Now, let me tell you my favorite tool. So, making your voting plan. Let me get to that. Was the screenshot I showed you was from a website, and I will drop that in the chat. It is the North Carolina State Board of Elections voter lookup, and this is going to help you if you live in the state of North Carolina. If you want to do a voter registration drive, if you want to check your registration, because I said here, I pretty much, it's very scary with, if you're very sure that your voter registration is up to date. You have to be very sure your voter registration is up to date. If you want to check on it, or anyone in your family, the best way of doing that is this website that I just dropped in, and it's your voter registration lookup. When you look up your voter registration, let me make sure I've got the right screen that I'm sharing here. When you look up your voter registration, on that link, it's going to ask you to put in your information. You find your name on the list and you click on it, and it shows that I live in Davidson County, like I said, and then I'm active. It's got my name, and it shows that I live in Lexington, North Carolina. And most people stop there. You're missing so much by stopping there. Cannot tell you how much you're missing by stopping there. If you click on your this will be a hyperlink. When you click on your name, it brings you into everything you want to know about you as a North Carolina voter. So let's go. I blocked out some of my information here, like my address, but it'll tell you your address. So if you moved, this is going to tell you where you're registered, what address you're registered. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I forgot totally to update my registration. That's why this link is so great. You can find out, oh yeah, I'm registered at the wrong place. Oh, I changed my party. I want to make sure that I get that. Think you might have time if that's if that's an issue with you, but with the municipal elections, they're usually nonpartisan, and usually you only have to worry about party when you're talking about primaries. But this is also where you check that information of what party you're registered under as well. And then it's going to tell you. I cut off the side here, but it's going to tell you your jurisdictions. These are where like my congressional district is 6, so it's going to say congressional district 6. It's going to tell me which North Carolina Senate, who I vote for, which seat do I vote for everything, all the way down to school board. And if there's a municipality, the judges, the prosecutorial. This is stuff that most people, if you ask me which superior court, I don't know. But if somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, I'm running for whatever," and I take their card, I can go home, look it up, and say, "Oh yeah, this is somebody I would vote for." Or you can look it up on your phone because I've given you that link. So you have the power now to find out who you can vote for. So these are these aren't the people. These are the positions, and this tells me what precinct I'm in. In case, okay, so precinct. Let me go into precinct a little bit for people who may not understand how that's set up. And I'm sorry I didn't think about that until I started talking about this. But precinct is, if we had to have just like one big bucket of voters for North Carolina to try to manage everybody just show up and vote on one day, it's going to be really difficult. So things are sectioned out to counties, which North Carolina has 100 counties. And then from the 100 counties, inside the county, they're split up into precincts. Some counties are larger, have more precincts. Some counties are have more people and have more precincts. So precincts are just a precinct is another way of when I say your polling location and precinct, those terms are not exactly the same, but the precinct is the area and the polling location is where you vote in that precinct. So they'll use those terms interchangeably. So I live in Robbins precinct, and Robbins is the name of my precinct, and I vote at, in my case, it kind of makes sense, at the Robbins Recreation Center. So your precinct is the smallest bite of where they manage elections. And it's a lot easier to manage an election rather than doing one big bucket of all the votes go in here and then we have to figure out, okay, well, that one goes to there. So it's all planned out very carefully, from the precinct up to the state, up to on federal elections, up to the US federally. One thing that a lot of people, this is me going off on a weird soapboxy moment. At this point in time, every state is responsible for how they run elections. And then when you go down into the municipal, because we're talking about municipal elections now, they have jurisdiction. They have jurisdiction is like the power over that area. So the municipalities say, okay, well, we're going to vote for mayors every X many years. It's all good. It's all in law. We're going to vote for, recently, my municipality just got school boards. See, we voted for school boards. We had a school board, but it was appointed. And recently, we're now allowed to elect our school board members. So the power of who decides which elections are happening and how they're run, municipal elections, that power lies within the city's municipalities. There's laws, so they can't just say we're going to elect an emperor, the emperor of Lexington, North Carolina. That's, there's still laws and guidances for that, but generally, the states are responsible for like the state elections and even up to federal, how we elect presidents and senators and stuff. So that comes into knowing that helps you understand a lot more of what's going on with like a lot of the things when they're talking about maps and redistricting. It's up to the states to decide how they're going to split up the bites instead of one big bucket, the bites of how they elect like for Congress. Okay, so off on that weird tangent, let's go back to jurisdictions. This seems like a pretty not that big of a slide, but it is so important to understand how these different bites are, because this congressional bite is different than the NC Senate bite, is different than the NC House bite. So this is our General Assembly here, and how those are set up is super important to know. But we can do an entire presentation on that later. Just understand that that's where you find the information on that link that I dropped. Okay, as we continue, this is again, you click, remember I told you click on your name and all this wonderful stuff happens. Here, Robbins Recreation Center. This is where I vote on election day. Gives you information. If I want to find out in my county, remember the early voting is done per county. So if you work in one county and live in another and you're trying to hit to vote early, before, after work, you got to get back to your county to do that. You can't just early vote anywhere, but you can vote wherever there's an early voting site in your county. And you click on this and it'll give you the times and the dates and the locations in your county where you can early vote from the October 16th to November 1st. But again, if I'm ready to vote on election day, I click on this link. Before I do that, I want to show you, if you continue going down, you know what? I'm going to absentee ballot. I'm going to do an absentee ballot. This is a really good place for you just to go. Rather than trying to hunt around on the website, just go to your own information and click on the absentee ballot portal. You can click right there and it'll bring you to where you can request your absentee ballot, your vote by mail ballot. If you go down a little bit lower, the best way, if you're doing like a voter registration or voter education and somebody says, well, how do I know if I'm going to vote in this election? Because remember, not all places are voting. If you look it up on that website, the one that I dropped in the chat, the voter lookup, if you look it up, click here on your voter search, click on your name. And it goes to here. This is like one long page. This is at the top of the page. We scroll down. This is the next part of the page. Then your voting locations. Look, I have a sample ballot. A ballot is available now because we know who's running. You may not have a sample ballot if your place has primary, because you'll have the primary ballot. But I don't have a primary where I live. So I can look right now at what my ballot's going to look like. You just click on this link and it opens it up. But let's go to the next page. See where I clicked. Let's go back here. Click on the Robbins Recreation Center. I don't know where that is. Somebody says, I know where it is. But if somebody's like, what is that Robbins Recreation Center? Click on it and look what happens. It gives you the address. You can look at pictures of it. Here's the picture of the Board of Elections. But if you click on here, there's a picture of the front door of your polling location. If you click on the hyperlink on the address, you can pull up a map and driving location or driving directions to it. and you'll see all the ballots that are available. Um, we're kind of weird in my city. I don't want to. I'm not going to get into it. These are all different ballots that can be voted on at my precinct. And if you look, I'm on uh, the one with the 0007. That's my ballot from the other page. I get that ballot. And that's also something important if you want to look and make sure some, boards of elections make mistakes. If your ballot doesn't look right, you can always look ahead of time and call up the Board of Elections and look, hey, there's the phone number right there. And there's where it is. I can walk in and know what the building looks like. There's even the phone number, there's the email address and everything saying, are you sure this doesn't look right to me? Are you sure this is my ballot? That's part of why you want to make a voting plan and know ahead of time. Because we can look at our ballot and find out if it, I thought I was voting. What I was trying to say, which I don't want to get into too much weirdness, in my town, we have our precincts, but we also have wards, and the wards are not the same as precincts. And that's why we have four different ballots in my precinct, because we have four different wards in my precinct. See, I told you I don't want to get into too much confusion. But living in my precinct, somebody says, "Oh, I thought this guy that was my neighbor who lives across the street is running for office, and I thought I was going to be able to vote for him because he lives across the street, but his name is not on my ballot." This is where you can call it the Board of Elections, saying, "Why isn't his name on my ballot?" And they can explain it to you. So it's always good to know that you can find this stuff out ahead of time with that one little link. Okay, so let's continue down. Oh, look, it's a sample ballot. If you click on that, it's going to bring up a PDF. You can even print this out and have it with you. Research your candidates. Remember, I showed you that the races, these are the actual candidates running. And I can decide, oh, I'm going to look up Jason Hayes. He's not running against anyone. So, and he's already been our mayor for two different terms. And he's doing a good enough job. He's doing a good job, but this is not me endorsing him. This is the fact that he's not running against anyone. And if I want to look up and see what kind of a job he's doing, I've got his name there. And if anyone else is running against him, I can go ahead and do that research on the candidates there. So there you go. There's that where I click to get it. Oh, let me show you something else too. We're talking about, getting the absentee ballot, right? If you want to do the early voting. There's no ballot information for it, but you can request again here. It tells you, it gives you more information, but this is super important. Ballot tracks, if anyone's going to do an absentee or vote by mail, please sign up for ballot tracks. It's not a perfect system because it's managed by the local boards of elections, and they might not have the staffing to make sure that it's up to date. But I sign up for ballot tracks. I request a vote by mail ballot, and I sign up for ballot tracks. And when they get my request, they'll send me a text message, an email, and a phone call saying, "We got your request." And then when they send it out, they'll send me the same thing, text message. You can sign up for one or all of those. I sign up for all of them. So I get a text message, an email, and a phone call saying, "We've just mailed out your ballot." And then when they receive the ballot, they'll let you know when they receive it. So ballot tracks is a good way of tracking your ballot. So let me show you a little bit more with this voter registration lookup. Again, you click on here, you put your information here, and that's how I got to my name. And search. If you're not finding yourself, you can do removed or denied. So we do the search, and that's how I got to my name. Let me see. I'm going to stop my share here, and I brought up a couple things. Democracy NC is one of the websites I brought up. And thanks, Abriana. Um, welcome. Democracy NC is not. I'm trying to work into a partnership with them because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. The Democracy NC, the reason I'm saying I don't want to reinvent the wheel is like I'm democracync.org, and it's little d democracy. This is not a partisan. This is the idea democracy that we that we're trying to maintain here. But the resources right here, there's a lot of resources like what's on the ballot, on the different, like, so let me see. I think I might be on Central Piedmont in the area. So this tells you more about the different elections that are happening. Yeah, I should be in here, towns of commissioners, and it gives you more information about the different elections. But this is the main thing that I like here too, is the voter ID stuff. If you want to know more, I didn't go into great detail about voter ID. Voter ID is needed in North Carolina. I believe that there are some. Let me see. Here's your if you're like doing a voter drive or something, a voter registration drive, I print out a lot of these and it tells you what is needed, what's acceptable. Um, so voters 65 or older may use an expired form of acceptable ID. If the ID was unexpired on their 65th birthday, it's good for life. Um, it doesn't matter what the address on your ID is. It's only used to prove who you are, not where you live. Um, so there's some good information here on that on this website. I like uh, hot tips for voting in municipal elections, voter registration form tip. Now, I didn't get into voter registration. You can register to vote numerous ways. When you get a driver's license or update your driver's license, you can register to vote at the DMV. You can register to vote online. You can register to vote um, if you get certain uh, like when I first moved here, I went to get on medical, and when I went to social services and I filled out my form, there was a thing to check on whether you can or to register. That's a way that you can register. And here, let me show you one thing that's super important because this is Disability Voting Rights Week. Let me go back to the North Carolina State Board of Elections website. And there is North Carolina State Board of Elections accessibility policy for alternative formats. One thing as a voter with a disability or as somebody who's helping a voter with a disability is know your rights. Know your rights going in there. A voter with a disability can choose anyone to be their agent, their helper. Um, and you can request for help. Um, let me see. There's an ADA coordinator right here. Allison, here's her information if you want to get a hold of her. There's alternative formats here. Um, and one of the things that they offer in North Carolina that's not offered in a lot of other places is if you are somebody who's doing the vote by mail, you can request an alternative format. Basically, it's like voting online, an accessible electronic absentee portal. Okay, that sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing. You can request of basically like an online where your screen reader could do it if you are um, blind, low vision. Thought I had a. Yep, here you go. Yeah, there's you can request those through the portal. So you should be able to request a ballot that way. There's a complaint request and help. Here we go. This is the better one. This is just giving you. Okay, so accessible voting sites, curbside voting should be allowed everywhere. Your ballot will be you'll have like a bell or something for somebody to come to your car and or if you're sitting, they'll come to you outside and give you a paper ballot. You fill it out. They go in there. They put it into the system and they bring you back. They should let you know that your vote has been cast. If that is a problem where you're at, I will give you some resources on. Well, of course, I just showed you the resource that you can reach out to the Board of Elections, but I'll give you some resources. The state board of election, but you can go to the county board of election if you've had problems. Here's the accessible absentee voting. You can get an accessible ballots 2 weeks before election day. Now, if you have somebody that lives in a facility or a nursing home, there used to be a law in North Carolina that you had to use a multi-partisan assistant team. They were known as a MAT. You don't have to do that anymore. So if you have people that you know that are in assisted living facilities, they can you can help them out with requesting their ballots. There's like a bunch of rules on that, but you don't have to use a MAT team anymore. Um, like I said, this is a very robust. I love this website. I love this website so much. Um, Information about voter ID. Um, all voters will be allowed to vote with or without photo ID. Remember, told you about the provisional ballot or provisions. You can vote if you can't show acceptable photo ID when voting in person. You fill out the ID exception form. And if you are doing the absentee by mail, you're unable to include, there's an ID exception form in there. There's so much stuff to get into the weeds with this. The main thing is don't let it overwhelm you. Make a voting plan. And then when you have that voting plan, you can always reach out to RevUp NC to help out. Like I said, RevUp nc.org, or you can email us at revupnc@gmail.com. We are not going to tell you who to vote for, and we are limited with what assistance we can give you. It's mostly the education, but Disability Rights NC will have a voter hotline number that you can reach out to. So Disability Rights NC is also there to help you out, help out with any voter questions. And it's always good to have some kind of voter protection hotline number ready if in case you run into any problems, because a lot of the stuff can be dealt with rather a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it can be dealt with while you're still there. So we lose a lot of people who get frustrated and leave, or we lose a lot of people who don't understand that you can always vote provisionally, and you might have to come back and prove what was going on. So that goes to my next thing. If there's a problem with your vote by mail ballot, or generally speaking, they say it's the container, the envelope, because they're not going to look at what's in your envelope when you send in a vote by mail until they've accepted what's on the container. So you have like certain notaries or witnesses, whatever they require on that container has to be and within there, if there's a voter ID exception, if you didn't fill that out, they may not accept your ballot. And some problems with a voter container or with a provisional ballot, or sorry, a vote by mail ballot, may be something that you cannot cure. Cure is to correct, make the correction so that it'll be acceptable. If there's a problem with your ballot, vote by mail ballot, some of them they just have to spoil it. They have to say, we can't take this one, you'll have to vote again. Or it's not voting again because they never accepted it, but you'll have to submit another ballot. Um, Sometimes you can cure that. Oh, I forgot to sign this line. Okay, come on in, have your witness. I don't know if that's a curable thing. I'm just telling you that there are things that are curable and they change. The reason I say I don't know is it changes throughout the election, which is why you have to make a plan. Which is why you have to make a plan. So we're good. A good resource again that you can reach out to about curing, but the Disability Rights NC is probably a better one. Or reach out to your board of elections because a lot of times if you're doing I work on curing ballots for a lot of organizations. And what that means is we know there's a problem with the ballot, but we don't know what it is. That stuff is public information. It comes out and says there was a problem with these ballots. So you get a name and everything. And so we reach out to the people that says, okay, Joe Schmo, there was a problem with your ballot. What's the problem? I don't know. But I do know there's a problem and it wasn't counted. So you have to call your board of elections, find out, and if we can help, let us know. And we can help. Not saying RevUp NC, but the organizations I work for, and that's one of the things I'd like to do with RevUp NC is find a way that we can help with curing ballots. And that's curing is also for provisional ballots. Remember, I told you that if you show up at a voting location and maybe there's something wrong with something that they said, no, you can't vote here. And you're like, yes, I can vote here because you can always vote provisionally. You might be able to cure a provisional ballot. And provisional ballot, provided that they get the right information by the time it's time to count that vote, it can be counted. I know that that's a lot of confusion, but a lot of this can be the stuff that I'm explaining now with curing and provisional ballots could be overcome with a solid, good voting plan. So the bottom line is here in North Carolina, we have municipal elections. You may not have an election this year. The best way to do is to go to that website that I showed you with your voter that shows your voter search. Click on that, and just like I showed you on those previous slides, you can find out not only if you have an election, but you can even look at the ballot. If you want to help us out here at RevUp NC, please reach out to us. Like I said, revupnc@gmail.com or look us up online at revupnc.org. And it's I'm so happy that you are here. If there's any questions, I know if you didn't make the entire the entire presentation, any critiques as well, anything that you want me to fill you in more, you can go ahead and unmute and ask questions if you'd like to, or raise your hand, and we will have a recording of this available for anyone to look at. Any questions? Well, I want to thank you for being here today. Let me tell you how proud I am of our small but mighty organization here, and we want to grow it here in North Carolina. We're proud to be doing this work because we are the largest, most intersectional voting bloc out there. And I know I got in the weeds with the curing of ballots, but I feel that now that there are concerted efforts to reach out and try to cure ballots, because vote by mail is used mostly by persons with disabilities, and if we are helping people who might have a problem with their ballot container or might have a problem with their ballot being counted, that's a vote by mail, and we're reaching out and actively being part of helping out those voters, I feel that that's part of, and I know that they haven't done studies on this because I asked, but I know that we're getting a rise in our population voting. And I think that's because we are going back and making sure that that the votes don't get left on the floor, because it's very frustrating if you go through the we all know what it's like. You go through the time and effort to cast a ballot, especially if you're doing it vote by mails. You know, here in North Carolina, you have to pay for the postage. In some states, you don't, but in North Carolina, you have to pay for the postage. And I don't know about you, but getting out to the post office is not at all easy. And you go through all that hassle of making sure you have the right amount of either a notary, or you have all the things signed and something happens that's wrong. That's an area I think that as voters with disabilities that we could do a lot more work with our RevUps and AAPD and the different organizations out there, is how can we help with curing ballots. And one of the biggest issues that we have as voters with disabilities, or people who have voters with disabilities in their families, is just general access, accessibility, getting rides. So those are things that hopefully RevUp can help be part of, making plans for that too. And that's got to be part of your voting plan as well, is how you're going to get there if you're going to go. But thank you for your time. I really do appreciate you. And yes, thank you, Abriana. It's good to see you here. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad you joined us today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care, and looking forward to seeing the beginning of the recording later on, but I appreciate your education.
Thank you. Crystal, do you mind turning off the recording? I gave Crystal the keys and I can't turn off the recording.